Got a full house today, don't we? That reminds me of last Sunday when one of the ushers said, "Is today that getting sexy back?" And I said, "No." I said, "You got young children?" He said, "No, I was just thinking somebody other than you and Jeremy ought to be speaking on this topic." And I said, "Well," I will admit, with the title that we gave it and all of the disclaimers that we've had, we have created expectations that are far beyond what Jeremy and I will be able to deliver. I can assure you of that. If I were to name it another name that might not get as many people, it would be the significance of sexual intimacy. I read where this father was talking about the other day, where it was in an email. He was riding down the road and his son said, "Dad, I know that babies come from mommy's tummies, but I have one question. How do they get in there?" Of course, the typical dad, stammering and stuttering and coming up with whatever. And finally, the little boy was just exhausted, said, "Dad, you don't have to make stuff up. If you don't know how it happens, it's okay." Which reminded me of the Super Bowl Kia commercial. Did you see that one? Where the little boy asks his dad where the babies come from, and he starts this elaborate story about this faraway planet where all the babies were made, and then they shoot the rockets, and then they have parachutes, and they come down, and then the babies land in the car. Of course, the little guy's looking over, and he's looking at his little baby brother in the seat there. He said, "Well, Daddy, Jimmy said that they come from," and then he, gives some kind of technological command, and the song comes on about the wheels going round and round, and everybody's singing. So they have successfully avoided the topic because of the technological advances of the Kia. So that was the whole point of being able to buy that particular car. But it does point out to just the whole fact of just the uncomfortableness of being able to talk about a topic like this today. But I tell you what, the world's not afraid to talk about it. And we don't need to cede it to them. We need to talk about it and talk about things and be natural in our discussion of it, because we've got a lot to say. The world, it's everywhere. We are now at a time and a stage and a place where we are inundated all of the time, whether it's TV, radio, movies, everything, the Super Bowl commercials. You watch those and you're afraid for your children to even watch. And what about the halftime show? I mean, you just might as well have been at the club with the striptease, except I guess I've never been to one. Not that there aren't pastors that would have in their past life, but they did keep most everything on. But it's and everybody just talking about how great it was, greatest halftime show ever. And I imagine a lot of you, if you've got young kids, you may want to hear Beyonce sing, but you didn't want to see her sing. In the church, we've been afraid to talk about it, but it's talked about in Scripture. It's talked about a lot. And the church has a very important voice about the beauty and the sacredness of sexual intimacy. And we've done a great disservice to our culture because we've not helped our culture understand that there's a deeper meaning to all of this. There's something a whole lot more than just a physical act. And we're talking about relationships. We're talking about this whole series is talking about relationships, in particular the marriage relationship. And this is a very important part of that relationship. That's hard to get it right. We're sexual creatures. God's made us that way, but yet this is always a very frustrating part of our relationship. But the Bible shows a very beautiful ideal of what sexual intimacy can be and should be and what it actually looks like in our lives. So our goal today is to understand some of that and how how we might be able to get it right, and by the end of the message offer some kind of helps for all of our relationships to be not stuck in a rut. First thing we'll talk about is just what the Scripture says and teaches about sexual intimacy. Just a couple of scriptures. You're familiar with it, Genesis 2, 24 through 25. This is why a man leaves his father and mother and is united to his wife, and they become one flesh. Adam and his wife were both naked, and they felt no shame. I mean, here you are right at the beginning of the Bible. I mean, you haven't gone 2 chapters deep, and this thing has crested at the top with the man and the woman. God has looked at everything, and He says it's good. And this story ends at the top with Adam and Eve becoming one flesh. I mean, a man sees a woman sees a man. They cling to each other. They're naked, and they're not ashamed. And that's one of our foundational stories. That's our foundational story. We've got the story. We started, God bringing it right out in the open, right in the beginning. He puts this right there in the very beginning. And I think there's some things to learn, from that. When he talks about naked and not ashamed, that this is something that's not dirty. It's not tawdry. It's not something to snicker at and make fun of. The Bible illustrates sexual intimacy as something that's beautiful, holy, and sacred. And God said it's very, very good. Unfortunately, I think the church has probably played a little role in the hush-hush, not talk about, not saying anything about it. We've been afraid to talk about it. We've been afraid to say anything about it. And in some parts of church history, it had been taught that the only purpose of sexual intimacy was for just the production of children. And so therefore, you ought not to be involved in that kind of activity unless you're having children. I think that's a tragic misunderstanding of the gift of God that He has given us. So I'll just talk about 3 brief ideas of the significance of sex as we find it in the Bible. The first is the biological function of creating children. Now, let me just say right up front on that that's not the only reason, but it is one of them. But it's not the only reason. There are couples that come together that are unfortunately unable to have children, and they're still able to enjoy God's gift to them. There are also couples, for whatever reason, choose not to have children. And so this is not the only reason, but it is one. God's designed our body so that the act of creating another human being is bound up in this act of sexual intimacy. And ages before birth control, every time a man and a woman came together, they had to think about the possibility of creating another human being. It could be formed. And in the act of sexual intimacy, we become co-creators with God. So God has set this thing, God is creator God. Almighty God's creator God, and now He is letting us share in that portion and that part of who He is and in His role. And this points to the fact that it's a very holy and beautiful and meaningful act designed by God, and also designed to be very pleasurable. Now, this is just me over here for a second, okay? I think you had to make it so irresistibly pleasurable because, if you watch the other generation when they come out, and you watch when kids got teenagers, you wouldn't have any children if you looked at that. Or maybe after you had your first one, you think, no, we can't do that again. That's just my own particular thought. But we keep coming back to produce more children in that because God has made it a pleasurable act. Second overall thing, biological act to create children. But then when Adam and Eve came together, they became one flesh. Now, this is really significant because I think a lot of times what we typically think is that's just physical. And certainly the world has told us, oh, there's nothing, it's just a physical act. There's nothing to it. But the act of sexual intimacy was not only physical, but it was also meant to be emotional and spiritual. The act was meant to bind us together. It was like the super glue that's going to hold us together. In fact, modern science has shown that what the Bible has taught is actually hardwired into our brains. We're among the 3% of mammals that are monogamous. And in that 3%, in the act of sexual intimacy, there are hormones released by the brain. Oxytocin, known as the cuddle hormone, or the love hormone, is released. In fact, it is also, if a woman is nursing her baby, that hormone is also released in that, and there is a bond that takes place there between those two because of just the physical hormone, the science of it all that's taking place. Both male and female produce this hormone, oxytocin, and vasopressin. Has the same sort of effect of bringing together the male and the female of the species. It binds them together. These hormones act like super glue to hold people together. So this is far more than a physical act. This is a physical act that also is a very spiritual act and has an emotional and spiritual dimension. It is meant to be a tool by which we're bound closer and closer and closer together. Adam and Eve came together, they became one flesh. The third overall is the idea of knowing another. In the Bible, the idea of being naked before another human being is to reveal yourself wholly to another person. It's symbolic of revealing your soul to the other person. And the Bible uses the word yada. Yada means to know. I don't know if Seinfeld knew anything about that. It was a yada, 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 yada. But the Bible uses, it's a euphemism for sex in the Bible. In Genesis 4:1, the man knew his wife Eve, and she conceived and bore Cain. Knew. I mean, when we were in seminary, and you're studying these words and doing stuff like that, and you always have all these theological jokes among yourselves. But, somebody would ask you, do you know so-and-so? And we'd say, well, not biblically. So just a play on the word. But this is part of the understanding of what this is. It literally means to know, to reveal, or to be revealed, to acknowledge, to understand another human being. So in the act of sexual intimacy, I become naked before you. I reveal my most intimate parts to you. You reveal your most intimate parts to me. And that's not just a physically seeing one another. It's symbolic of a deeper awareness and knowing of another human being. And the Bible is showing us what a beautiful idea this thing called sex is. It's a moment in which we become co-creators with God. We're bound together as two human beings, revealing oneself to another to the depths of our souls. That's symbolized by the physical nakedness, but it's a seeing and a knowing of another human being at a depth. So sex is meant to be playful, pleasurable. It's a good gift from God. It's holy and it's profound if we understand it right. Well, the challenge comes then, number two, just today's society doesn't understand any of the things that we've just talked about. I mean, sex has been so trivialized that it is almost meaningless. It started back in the 60s. Hey, you appreciate the little songs this morning? That little one, I got you back. That has a little bad memory because I can remember going on my little telephone in Geneva, calling up the radio station. I'm in the 6th grade, I think. I said, would you play I Got You, Babe? And my mother heard it. She got on to me or something. She said, what are you requesting that song for? I don't know, Mother, I just did. Anyway, that brought back a memory. Thank you, Mom. It started at the sexual revolution in the 60s, and it continues today. We've got terms like friends with benefits. We hook up. We have sexual pals. I remember a parent called me one time and says, my God, you're not going to believe what just happened. My child, one of our friends set her up for her 16th birthday just to go and have sex, just so she would not be a virgin with a guy she didn't even know. I'm sure we have no idea of the depth, of the loss, of the meaningless of all this. Sex is something we do at the end of a date. We've had a great date. We've had dinner. Now let's go and be intimate with each other. Oh, really? I've known you now for 6 hours, and I'm going to go and bare my soul to you. I'm going to show and bear the tenderest part of my life to you. I am going to become one with you, and we're going to have a bond like that. Oh, really? We've trivialized it. And what has happened? We've trivialized it so to where we lose the power that sex can have in our lives. We no longer allow it to function the way it's supposed to, and to experience the power that it can have in binding people together. Now, when I walked out of the house this morning, Lisa saw me with it. She said, you using a visual aid today? And I said, yeah, I'm not the only creative. You're not the only creative person in the family. I'm real creative. Anyway, I got a piece of duct tape. I love duct tape. Duct tape can fix anything. If duct tape can't fix it, you don't need it. You just throw it on away. But I got a little piece of carpet. Everybody's been curious about this piece of carpet. But anyway, it's a metaphor. Duct tape is designed to be sticky and to bond to things. And if you go, and you can take this and you put it on, and I'm going to really get it really sticky on there because duct tape sticks. It's created to bond to stuff. And it gets a little hard to get it off, but I can. You say, well, I want to bond with this person. And so you bond with this person. And you say after a while, oh, well, this didn't quite work out exactly the way I thought it would work out. So I don't think I want to be bonded to that person anymore. And you can't see these, but it begins to pick up little stuff. But then you go somewhere else. You say, yeah, I want to bond with this person. So you get that, and you just bond with that person again because, that's happened. But after a while, you think, I think this isn't working out the way I thought and everything. So you go off and you go to another person and you do that and you just get that all sticky. And you know what's going to happen, don't you? Because each time I'm pulling off parts of the other person, each time things are getting stuck on here. And after a while, I had to worry about it being sticky, but I don't even have to worry about it anymore. It doesn't work like duct tape anymore. It's lost its sticky. And it can't bond like it started to, like it was made to bond. I don't say that to create judgment on anybody or anything. I mean, I know the world in which we live today. It almost seems antiquated to stand up here and talk about only having sex with one person. It seems antiquated to sit up here and to talk about asking people to wait until they're married to have sex. And yet, there's a biblical ideal. The biblical ideal is that two people would make a covenant with each other. They would stand before God and say those vows, till death us do part, and for richer, for poor, and sickness, and in health. And then after those vows are made, those two people reveal themselves completely and vulnerably to the other human being. And they're sexually intimate, and the chemicals of the brain are released, and they serve to bind them together. And over time, those chemicals are released every time, and over time, they are bound more and more and more. There are scientific studies that verify this. A group of psychologists in the year 2010 with 2,000 married couples. They published this in the Journal of Family Psychology. Here's a quote. Psychologists found that couples who waited until after the wedding night rated the stability of the relationships 22% higher than those whose physical relationship developed earlier. They were also found to have 20% increased levels of relationship satisfaction, 12% better communication, and 15% improved sexual quality. This is the opposite of what we're told in the world. Absolutely opposite. You've got to live together and figure everything out and see if y'all match up and if everything fits, and got to do all that to see if that all works out, and then you do it. And this is saying that it's not coming out statistically that way at all. Now understand, this is water under the bridge for most all of you. And that's not my point, is to heap guilt on anything or anybody. Our point is to say, cannot we recover the sacredness of sexual intimacy, the depth of meaning, and what it's about and what it means? Well, thirdly, how does it actually work in real life? And that's where all the conflict and the fun really begins, because it's probably like falling in love. You fall in love and you think, you just have love for the rest of your life and everything. But then you find out, if you don't work at it, you get in a rut with love. You fall out of love. You drift apart. You have to work at a love relationship. I wish somebody had told me that a long time ago. You have to work at this. And the same thing is true of sexual intimacy. You might think that this is easy, but it's just like being in love. It becomes very frustrating. In fact, one of the questions on our surveys that we ask is, how satisfied are you with the sexual intimacy in your relationship? Over 363 people in our congregation answered that question. 54% said that they were satisfied or very satisfied, which means 46%, this is from 20s to 80s, 46% were either unsatisfied, very unsatisfied, or neutral. I simply say that to say that it points out the struggle and the issues that are there, that this is not a slam dunk kind of thing. This is something that has to be worked out. What was interesting was to note that the frustration went down the older the group, the older you were, the more satisfied you were with sexual intimacy in your marriage relationship. Isn't that incredible? You know what? The highest rate of satisfaction was in the 70-year-olds and above. So see, guys, you got something to look forward to. One day it is going to get better. It was interesting. As the frequency went down, satisfaction went up. As you might guess, on the frequency question was much higher in the 20s and 30s. However, their satisfaction level was among the lowest. And you might guess, there's a number of factors that I can begin to think of as a struggle. There is these are the childbearing years. These are the career starting years. And you got 2 career households and all that, and it's just very difficult. It's just too too little time, too much to do, all this, and that's what happens to our sexual relationship. But in the 60s and 70s, the frustration levels go down. There was a book, Intimacy and Desire, where David Snark said, in every relationship, there's a high desire partner and a low desire partner. Frustration builds because desires are not equal. I find it helpful just to know that's normal. That's a normal thing. Usually the high desire might be the male and the low desire might be the female, but as in any generalization, it can be the other way around. But what that helps us to understand and see about how this actually works in real life is that couples need to learn to dance together. I mean, in other words, you got to learn to meet in between. The reason that this goes back to remembering this covenant that we've made with each other, that I am going to seek to help you, to bless you, to encourage you. And so there's give and take. I think they were struggling back this even in biblical times. Listen to what Paul said in 1 Corinthians 7, 2-5. But since sexual immorality is occurring, each man should have sexual relations with his own wife and each woman with her own husband. Then get this, the husband should fulfill his marital duty to his wife. Now there's your good term, marital duty. The husband should fulfill his marital duty to his wife, and likewise the wife to the husband. The wife does not have authority over her body, but yields it to her husband. In the same way, the husband does not have authority over his own body, but yields it to his wife. Do not deprive each other, except perhaps, let me repeat that, do not deprive each other. Except perhaps by mutual consent and for a time, so that you may devote yourselves to prayer. Then come again, so that Satan will not tempt you because of your lack of control. Now, in the midst of preparing this message, I get this email from my wife, Lisa, giving me instructions about what to say. And it was so funny, I had to run out and show this. I said, look at here what my wife told me to say. I said, I've got to see if she'll let me say this. She said, yes, I want you to say this. I'm just going to read you the email. Make sure I get it right. It didn't say dear rule. It just started like this. In this weekend sermon on sex, please don't just tell wives to have more sex with their husbands. Tell husbands to court and romance their wife so that she will be interested. Most husbands don't seem to get that. Is there any subliminal stuff going on here? I feel I'm kind of just hanging out on the limb out here for some reason or another. Most husbands don't seem to get that. Every woman has triggers, and that is the first thing a husband should figure out. Okay, so Lisa, I said it to them. You see, there's give and take. There's give and take. And boredom can set in when no effort is put into the relationship. And couples need to work at it, making it more enjoyable within the confines of what is appropriate in a marriage relationship. Now, I wish I had more time to talk about sexual intimacy. Will not always be a 10. Sometimes it'll be a 1. I wish somebody told me that years ago, too. That's helpful. You know, it's kind of like the difference in a 5-course gourmet meal and a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. 5-course, going to have a 5-course gourmet meal, you know, you got to start in the morning. You think about, you know, what all food it's going to take, and you might have a food list, and you go to the grocery store, and you buy all the food, and you get my drift on the metaphor? Don't leave me hanging out here, okay? But anyway, the peanut butter sandwich is very nutritious, but it's very short and quick to make. And, not all are 10s, not all are 1s. I think what it does, it helps us to have realistic expectations. And don't assume that any other couple is more intimate than you are. Okay, tips. I got about 1 or 2 minutes here to just, I want to just say some things to help you get out of a rut. Go out on a regular date night with your spouse. Fix a time where you say, this is going to be our time. This is going to be time where we're going to go out. When you filled out the survey, you need to get this. In the 20s, how often do you go out on date night with your spouse? 6 times a year or rare. 6 times a year was one and rarely was one. 51% of our 20s are only going out 6 times a year or rarely. In the 30s, it was worse than that. 67% of you guys are not going out more than 6 times together with your wife on a date or your spouse. 50s and 60s beat you again because, you know, they're in the empty nest and all that. Guys are generally wanting sexual intimacy, and the girls are wanting to be romanced. So use that time to come together and meet that need. Get out on a regular day. Go to our website. We put our website down here, marriedlifeonline.com. You don't have to write it down. It's on the back of your thing, /great date. If you're having trouble coming up with something creative you can do that. Read a marriage book together. And guys, don't fall asleep. If you fall asleep, you lose all the points. That's a big withdrawal. But you be the reader. That brings up all the topics that you need to be talking about because they're so uncomfortable. Nobody wants to talk about these topics. You don't want to talk about them. You don't want to talk about them at church. You don't want to talk about them at home. But when we raise it up and get it up out in the open, it gives you something to talk about and do that. Number 4, I wrote down, have the frequency talk. Just have it. It may not be fun. It may be uncomfortable, but have it and talk about it. And then the last thing I wrote down was see a counselor if you need to be. This whole sexual thing is a very complex thing. Maybe you've have abuse in your background. Maybe any number, maybe of bad experiences or whatever. Maybe hormones. And a lot of times you say hormones, you think women, but men have hormones too. And, you know, if you find that there are struggles in there, sometimes maybe even a doctor's trip. But there are things to do. Don't just sit back and take everything. Talk about things. Take some steps. Do some things. And maybe it may even mean going to a counselor to talk or to a doctor and see. Now, I'm done. We decided to do this the day before Valentine's week. Okay, guys, you got 4 days. You got 4 days to work on this. Okay, take this one to the bank. Don't wait to the night before to go buy a card and gift. Guys, don't do that. You've been warned. I know you didn't even know it was February. Thursday is the 14th. That is Valentine's Day. Okay? You want what you want, help her get what she wants. That works together and trying to meet each other halfway and learning how to dance together and meet each other's needs. That's what the covenant of marriage is. I want to bless you. I want to encourage you. I want to do what's going to love you in the way of your love language. Find out what your wife, find out what your husband's love language is if y'all have not done that yet, so that you can communicate to your spouse that you love them in a way that they will get it. Let's pray. Father, thank you for listening to our message today. I hope that you've been inspired to act upon what you've just heard and become a doer of the Word. Feel free to contact us through the information on the screen or through our website.
Better yet, if you're ever in the Niceville, Florida area, feel free to stop by and visit us at the Niceville United Methodist Church.